I'm Johanna, I'm from Finland, where the weather is cold, and therefore to keep us from dying, the buildings are warm. So I'm freezing today. My apologies. I realize my job today is to give the exact same talk that everybody else has already, but it includes some diagrams that I have drawn with my fingers, so that's new. Yeah, that was a great presentation, Lizzie. I'm going to skip my first bit. All of what she said was true. We work with cool customers. But we also make LARPs for LARPers, which for me personally is where the real juicy stuff happens. Yeah, today I'm going to talk about the concept commonly and imprecisely called LARP safety, which is obviously a useful discipline for all of us to engage with very deeply, but I only have 15 minutes. So I'm going to talk about it on a really zoomed out level, essentially recapping everything that we have heard so far today. I'm going to present the basic framework to start thinking about what is required for your participants to be safe from harm, which is one thing, and to feel safe enough to voluntarily engage with new and potentially challenging things, which is another thing. That's that thing that we call LARPing. That's like the actual play bit that Mori was just talking about. So being safe and feeling safe, both important and vital for your game, but not the same thing. The principles that I'm talking about are true for LARP, but they are equally applicable to any kind of participatory event, ranging from organizing a birthday party to an immersive theater performance, for instance. So if you remember only 3 things I said today, let's make them these 3 things. First, LARP safety, the way we talk about it in our community, is a blanket term that collapses actual safety procedures with other things that are not about dangers, but just about life. Handling emotional reactions or social awkwardness, trusting strangers, playing nice together. All of these are fascinating objects for design. All of these are at the very core of making good LARPs. All of these are part of what we call LARP safety, but safety is a bad word here because these things are not dangerous in themselves, therefore they are not questions of safety, they're questions of something else. Establishing trust and play style calibration. Calibration, pretty new word now, a couple of months we've been using this. Calibration is when we calibrate the nuances of my play style and your play style live while we're playing so that we can play together in this situation. So we need these new words, other words, more precise terms, and I think also when we start using these words, we will gain a less hysterical tone of voice when talking about the things that are not actually dangerous, which is super constructive for the community. Second, when we design LARPs, we design games, but also experiences and communities, and these things that we call safety operate as a system and interact with each other on all of these levels. And third, that while there are very many different ways of organizing the design of trust and playstyle calibration and safety in LARP, one methodology that works really well and that I would suggest as the baseline for all of your work should be the opt-in, opt-out design principle. And that's what I'm going to talk about most. Okay. Opting in and opting out of situations or entire games means making active choices. Opt, like the word option, comes from Latin, optare, to choose or wish. If your game has an opt-in, opt-out design, you construct it to give each individual player maximum agency over what kinds of situations they will participate in or be exposed to. This involves enabling them to make active choices. So for you, the process is to think through the path of each participant to your game and through your game as a series of forking paths where they have to be presented with some alluring suggestions, of course, of what you want them to do. You want them to come to your game, you want them to play this cool scene, you want them to engage with this theme and this topic, but you want to make it in a way where they make the choice of whether to go there or not, so they need to know what's happening beforehand. All of these choices are meaningless unless they are informed, and that most importantly starts when the players are deciding whether to sign up for your game at all. They will need to know what kinds of things, what themes they will be exploring. They will need to know what types of experiences they will have and what kinds of activities they will be doing. And you can tell them all of this stuff without spoiling the content of your game at all. Types of things, not exact things. You see the distinction. And you should tell them all that, because this will solve one of your major problems, which is players showing up at your game who that's not their game. And they're going to be angry at you for not designing the game that is in their mind, that they wanted to play. And you know what? It's not their fault, it's your fault. Because you didn't tell them what game you were making. And this telegraphing, this need to make informed choices, which requires having information beforehand, it also applies at the level of individual scenes or new elements or story beats being introduced gradually into the game. You can build in subtle, and if you're new to this, don't even be subtle. You can build in super clear gate posts where participants actively choose to engage with the next thing or the next level in the story. Now, unfortunately, there are some limitations to the opt-in approach, and I think the talks have covered some of these. First, humans don't actually have set limits for what they can handle. That's not how it works at all. So I might choose to sign up for your LARP about political oppression and religious fundamentalism, and I'll be fine on day 1, and on day 2 I realize, nope, that was my limit right there, can't handle it anymore. Or I might be fine playing romantic scenes with one person, be entirely unwilling to do it with the next person, often for no particular reason. Or perhaps we just have bad chemistry, or perhaps I was fine playing with her just now, but then my husband walked into the room and then I thought of something else, and it's not even a personal, it's not even forbidden, it's just like I lost my feeling for this thing that was happening right now. Or perhaps some person is super creepy for me, for some totally valid reason. And very often I'll be okay exploring some interaction with some player that I'm playing with, up to a point. And I don't know what that point is until I'm there, and I certainly won't know it weeks or months in advance. So it's not a very meaningful choice to me to say you must be playing intimate scenes with players that we don't yet know who they are, because nobody signed up for this game yet. Like, that's not informed choice. So that's one of the reasons why opting in is obviously not enough. Second, LARPs have emergent content. Players bring a lot of story and a lot of themes and social dynamics that are totally or mostly beyond your control. You can direct them with your game design and your fiction design, as Mori was talking about, and you absolutely should. You can ban play on certain themes in your games. That's a really good idea. If your game is not about rape, let's just say we're not going to play about rape at all. But I promise you that no matter how well you do this, stuff will emerge in your game that you haven't thought about in advance and therefore couldn't telegraph to the players. Third, and I think this is actually the most important if you're organizing players that attract people who haven't LARPed before, we really suck at explaining to people how powerful LARP is. We have all had this experience. We go to a LARP, and it's awesome, and we come home and we want to tell our family or we want to tell our friends what we've experienced, and we are utterly unable to communicate it. Why the hell was this thing called? They don't get it. And we can spend hours, and we do. And they still don't get it. And this is true even of pretty shit games, because when I started LARPing in 1995, objectively speaking, all of the games we were making and playing were terrible by today's standards. Bad game design with trivial, stupid stories and cardboard characters. And we still had these mind-blowing experiences and these enormous emotional journeys. And we will tell our first comers that this society that you're about to enter will feel real, and you will actually functionally become somebody else for a while, and these relationships will be important to you, and you will laugh and cry and grieve, and they will say, yeah. And don't believe them. And then they experience it, and they're like, why didn't you tell me? I totally did. And then this happens. Even with very experienced LARPers, you will tell them stuff that is super specific, and they will just not believe you for unclear reasons. Norwegian mountains are very cold, even in the summer. At this science fiction LARP, we will be eating Japanese clay. At this scenario about terminal cancer patients, the scenography is 800 kilos of wheat flour, so if you are asthmatic, you might actually die. Don't sign up to the game. You tell them these things, and they don't believe you. So opting in is not enough. That's why you also have to, that's why it's an opt-in, opt-out design. You must be able to opt out continuously. And if you work with the pure all the way through opt-in, opt-out design, the player must be able, at every point in the LARP, to leave each situation physically, to begin with. This is a pretty big ask, actually. It's completely solvable, but you have to think about this in advance. You might have to make rules about tying people up, like you can do that, but then it has to be in a pretend way. You might have rules about blocking doors, social situations, and so on. But that is not enough. The player must be able to leave without loss of face. Without loss of face to the player, and without loss of face to the character. And actually, John, I thought your presentation was wonderful, ingenious. I loved everything about it, but I will suggest a hack. So we have a rule at this convention that the door is open, and if you feel like you don't want to be in a thing, you can leave. That's our baseline, that's our rule. Then John said, here's the kinds of things my presentation will engage with. I'm now going to take a 10-second break so that you can leave, remember? And then we all sat here awkwardly for 10 seconds. So my hack is, ask people to close their eyes. If we had all closed our eyes, and he said, now you can leave if you need to leave, wouldn't that have been a lot easier for the character of you in this room? Yeah. Right? So the physical and social realities, and this is basic experience design, because this isn't actually a LARP, this is just life, right? The physical and social design interact on a systemic level. The rule is not enough, you have to think about how all of these engage. Players will often stay in a situation because it would make no sense for their character to leave. Or because they are afraid of being censored or questioned after the fact, or afraid of ruining the scene for other people. And here, by the way, clearly, so designing a cut rule is not enough, and also those don't work unless you workshop them, you have to practice in advance. But even if you have one, it doesn't help because of all of these other reasons why people don't want to bother each other. And there's a new flexible technique that I heard about that was invented in a bar a few weeks ago, but I haven't seen it tried in any games. You can have one hand sign that you can introduce in your LARP is this. If the player does this and walks away, it means this is the X card for LARP, I think. Unless you need this gesture culture in your LARP, but it could be this, which is different from this. This might say I need to do a thing. This says, I'm reaching a limit here, I'm just going to subtly remove myself, let's not play on that, you guys continue, I'm fine, I'm going away. That is different from I need everybody to stop because we need to handle my thing. And sometimes we need these choices. Okay, so in short, the player's ability to opt out of situations needs to be designed, not just into the rules, but into the in-game cultures, so that there's always a valid reason for characters to slip out. That could be taking a call on their cell phone, it could be going to the magical grove to pray, or whatever. Or go to the bathroom. But then sometimes vampires and they don't go to the bathroom. Like, you need to think of something role specific. The character writing needs to reflect these opportunities. Don't make characters who can't protect where the players can't protect themselves. That's a terrible design. And you have to think about all of this when you construct the in-game hierarchies of your LARP. And the more sandboxed you are, the more you have to think about this, because the players are going to, as Maury said, if you don't design this, the players are going to breed this. And there are two, it's dangerous, I think sometimes in Europe or in the Nordic countries where we don't play very gamist systems, we're like, well, this is obviously more of a problem in the gamist systems because people want to win and they don't want to lose their points and blah, 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 and that's going to keep them doing more things. And I'm pretty sure that there are Americans who say, well, obviously this is more of a problem in the Nordic immersionist style of play, where they're all in it for the story, and they want to engage in brink play, and they want to do these hardcore things, so that's why they don't want to break. No, it would seem to me this is pretty universal, we all have this problem. Yeah. People, it's difficult to leave a LARP, it's difficult to cut a scene, it's difficult to leave a situation, so you have to build it in so that it's fluid and subtle and easy to do, and people have practiced it in advance. Yes, so let's now think very briefly again then about opting in. A LARP is doing things together, and that requires trust, as we have heard. And that core game design, all the rules of how do you handle the calibration and how do you break scenes, and of course all the basic safety design, all that's a requirement for the trust to be there to begin with. If I know that I'll be able to leave, then I'll be braver in engaging with situations inside the fiction. But this also means that the player must trust you as an organizer. They need to trust that you have a plan against dehydration and fire and bears, if you're in Norway. And they need to trust the design. They need to trust the design of the game so that it is possible to cut the scene if you have promised that it will be possible to cut the scene. And that trust is something that you have to earn. Delivering on your promises, acting professionally, having the logistics in place, organizing a good check-in process at arrival, answering concerns promptly, expressing gratitude about the participants' contributions to your LARP, never yelling at other organizers in front of players, never, ever, ever yelling at your players. These are common sense experience design rules, but they will also allow your players to play intense love scenes or cool battles, because that trust, all of that trust engages with each other in a system. In the Nordic countries, we often use workshops before the game to communicate game content so that people don't have to learn big briefs. Actually, I think the point of the workshop mostly is to establish trust between the players. But you can do this in other ways. Just have them solve a problem, like have them build a tent together or something like that, out of character before the game starts. And it will be so much easier for them to actually play together. And don't call it a workshop, like it's secretly a workshop, we don't need to tell them that. Okay, so why not just talk about game design? Here is my diagram, which I have drawn with my finger. The reason for that is that that's how game design also works. It's a beautiful thing in your mind, and then humans and resources, right? So this is a timeline. Here you announce your game. The green thing here is the runtime, where people are mostly in character. You could say that the green thing is the magic circle. The curly bracket here is when people are on location. That's when you can actually control what they're doing. That is real estate, that time. You want to program every minute for them to do things that are optimizing the game, and then you're forgetting that they actually need to talk to each other out of character, because that's when a lot of trust is constructed. There are informal and formal activities here. But in fact, between the announcement and people arriving on site, where LARP preparation in its broadest terms happen, and also the player selection happens, this is where all of your problems need to be solved. This is when the design needs to be in place and communicated and agreed upon in some manner by all of the buy-in into what are we trying to do here is happening between all of the players. Disappointment is relative to expectation. Here, where you establish to your players what we're going to do together, is when you decide whether they will be disappointed in your game or not. You can just give them really, really low expectations, and they will be not disappointed. That's, you know, a valid method. Some people operate like this, but like, you know. But if you want them to have high expectations, you have to deliver on them here. But again, like, you can be very solid on all the practicalities, logistics, and so on. That's going to help you down the line. The other thing is that the memory of the game is generated after the runtime. While you're playing the game, I'm in my sort of subjective story. Then when we stop playing, then this negotiation happens between all of the players when we decide a bunch of very important things. What happened in this LARP? What kind of a game was this? Was this a good game? Was this a good experience? Do these organizers know what they're doing? Did we have fun? Collectively, like I had fun, but most people didn't have fun, maybe, like that's maybe the story you live with. So what's happening here, often in the Nordic countries we have like a formal debrief and an after party and certain organized activities, and maybe people get to pack the stuff together and solve problems together, because 80% of their experience is going to be determined by the last 20% of the thing. It would be very silly of you not to design that. And it's not manipulation, because people want to come to your thing and have a good experience. Please help them have good memories of your thing by organizing this instead of descending into some kind of weird chaos where people are crying and hugging and disappearing on each other. And you haven't slept for a month. And also, I mean, a lot of people are making LARPs for status. So the afterlife and the attention and the story of what your game's going to be and your status in the community, by the way, is depending on that whole conversation that happens in those few hours after the game. You would be idiotic not to design that just as carefully as you design this. And the most important thing to design is everything that happens before the LARP starts, between announcement and the start of runtime, because that design process, those things that you're putting your players through there, that is where everything that we've been talking about today happens. Okay, how are we on time? Okay. So, game design, experience design, community design. When we talk about safety, we're operating on all of these levels. In the game design level, calibration mechanics and simulation mechanics, obviously, real swords or foam swords, important design decisions, but also, like, how do we negotiate? Experience design, event safety, trust work and trust design. So every kind of design choice that you would make making a convention also applies to making a LARP. It's just that we're also going to be playing some games here, but this is on a higher level. And here the fire safety and bear start. That's about dangers. And predators, other kinds of predators as well. Sure, all of that stuff is here. That is safety. This stuff, not so much with the safety, but we're going to call it LARP safety anyway, because we're stupid that way. Community design, community norms, and community safety. Are we a toxic environment? How do we deal with each other? How do we treat new people? Do we invite people in? It's going to affect trust up here so much. But this is the rolling, a ball that rolls down a timeline, and this timeline down here is your LARP culture. And every game you make operates in the tradition of your LARP culture. And if you're mixing players from different LARP cultures, big problems, right? And also creates your LARP culture and recreates it. For every game you make, every choice you make, shapes the understanding and expectations of your players for how safety operates. Okay. So the safety and safety. Safety implies danger. Don't talk about player safety if you mean fundamental human interactions. Consent, I'm sorry to say, because I know you Americans love this, I think this is a troublesome word in the context of co-creation, because it's about I'm consenting to stuff to be done to me. I want us to negotiate about stuff we're going to do together. Applies to sex also, by the way. So nuanced negotiation requires flexible calibration tools. Okay. Trust is a prerequisite for play, but also allows the player collective to stray from poorly designed rules and escalate engagement, especially in sandbox designs. So if you have managed to create a player base that really love each other, oh my god, they're going to take your thing and run with it because they feel safe. They might actually start doing some stuff that makes them not be safe. Like, we can do full contact fighting, that's not what we practiced, but we're fine. Real example. Huh. The zombies are attacking up the stairs. I'm just going to throw this sofa at them. So you need to build in some limits as well. Like again, you can't do one, you have to do both. In conclusion, LARP safety is a useful but imprecise umbrella term that collapses the players' need to be safe and their need to feel safe. When we design safety, we're not just designing runtime rules and practices. You can't, and also super important, you cannot copy safety mechanics. You can't take like, oh, we have the cuts rule here that works great, and throw it into another LARP, because everything is different about the social environment, the fiction, the characters, everything is different. So you have to think about them in systems. Your design must distinguish between that which makes safety, that which makes trust, and that which makes consent. And they can overlap, and they always interact. That's all I have time for today. I'm sure I've gone over time, I'm sorry. Like this week, literally, I have launched a blog called participationsafety.wordpress.org, where I'm just going to brain dump everything I know about this, which is quite a lot, because I've been doing this for 5 years now. So then you can have some practical things, and I will take requests on topics to write about, and you can totally support it on Patreon and give me your $1. So it's participationsafety.wordpress.org. Thank you.